Today we are going to write equations of perpendicular bisectors. This should be very similar to what we did in our last video with writing equations of lines and combining information from our previous notes about midpoints and slope. And if we can put this all together, we will be able to write equations of perpendicular bisectors. So right now we are given the segment AB, and we have the coordinates -2, 1, and 6, 5. And we, in order to figure out the equation of a perpendicular bisector, we have a 4-step process. And the first step is to find the midpoint of AB. So reminding ourselves of the midpoint formula, it's in your flip book, it's in your previous notes. We are averaging the x coordinates, averaging the y coordinates. So I'm going to label this as x1, y1, and this is x2, y2. So plugging it into our formula, we have a -2 plus 6, divide that by 2. And for our y values, we have 1 plus 5, divide that by 2. Now, if we combine this, so a -2 and a +6 gives us a +4 over 2. 1 plus 5 gives us 6 over 2. And when we reduce this out, we find our midpoint is 2, 3. And if we plot this on our line, go over 2, up 3, this should visually make sense that it's in the middle of AB. Second thing we're going to do is find the slope of AB. So again, reminding ourselves of the slope formula. Again, it's in your notes from previous. It's also in your flip book. Change in y over change in x. So using the same coordinates from up above, if we were to plug this in the formula, we would have y2, which is 5, minus y1, which is 1, divided by x2, which is 6, minus x1, which is a -2. So now be careful with your signs on that. So simplifying the numerator, we would have a 4. Simplifying the denominator, 6 minus a -2, it's like plus a +2, would give us a total of 8. And we always want to reduce our slopes. So we can see here the slope of line AB is 1/2. And again, we should be able to visually check that and say, if I go up 1 and over 2, again, that makes sense. Now, to find the slope of a perpendicular line, so we have to remember, okay, if our regular slope is a +1/2, our perpendicular slope, we want to think flip and negate. So if I flip the 2 over 1, I'm sorry, 1 over 2, it now becomes 2 over 1. It started off positive, I need to negate it. Okay, so our perpendicular slope, once we reduce and simplify, is just a -2. All right, so now we're at the point where we're going to write the equation of this perpendicular bisector, and notice the form they're asking for. They're saying in slope-intercept form. That's our mx plus b form. I wouldn't necessarily start there, however. I would probably start with our point-slope form, which, if we recall what that is, and again, in your flip book, in your notes, that's our formula y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So the reason I'd start here is because we have each of these things. We have the point and we have the slope. So when we write this perpendicular bisector, things we want to keep in mind. What we're going to use. Number 1, for the point, we're using the midpoint. We found that up above. Okay, our midpoint is the coordinates 2, 3. And number 2, we're using our perpendicular slope, and that we found to be -2. In our equation, we are going to use the midpoint as x1 and y1 when we write the equation. So over here, plugging this in, I now have y minus our y1, which is 3, equals the slope, -2, parentheses, x minus x1, which is 2. Now, if we stop here, our equation is in point-slope form, but that's not what the question wanted. The question wants it in slope-intercept form. So that means we have to distribute through So we now have y minus 3 equals negative 2x. Negative 2 times a negative 2 is a positive 4. And again, slope-intercept form, we want y by itself, so taking one step more, we're going to add 3 to each side, and we now have the equation y equals negative 2x plus 7. So what we have just found here is this is the slope. I'm sorry, this is the equation of our perpendicular bisector to that given line segment up above in the graph. Hope you liked the video. If you like it, make sure to like the video on YouTube and don't forget to subscribe.